Hey there, it's Brian the Cobbler at LB Shoe Repair and Cowboy Boots. I want to do another repair video, but first I want to talk about some of the challenges of COVID-19. One of them being the regulations and restrictions with social distancing and a lot of the challenges that employers are having getting their employees back into the shop. I am going to be getting help with this repair, which I'll talk about in a moment. I have got a new hire. His name is Wilson, and he is COVID-19 restriction free. We are not having to worry about social distancing. So I'd like to introduce him, and he's going to help us with this next project. Wilson? Wilson? Wilson! There you are. Okay. So, Wilson, go ahead and say hello into the camera here. We're making a video, so just introduce yourself. Just say a couple words. Okay. Anyways, today me and Wilson are going to be working on a Red Wings Resole. We have a nice, high-quality pair of Red Wings work shoes, and we're going to do a new resole on these. Now, Red Wings does allow its customers to send their boots back to the factory for a resole, and they do a fantastic job. You will find that your local shoe repair shop can do it as well at a very competitive price. It's typically going to be a much quicker timeline, and you don't have to worry about shipping. And speaking of time and timelines, you know, we really try to maintain a standard for getting a job done on time. It all depends on how much work is backed up in the shop. But you know, I try to have things done within a week or less. So we are okay. Anyhow, so we are going to get back to the bench, and Wilson here is going to help me with this resole. Okay, so we are at the bench, me and Wilson, and we've got our project. As always, it's a good idea to take these laces out. They're just going to get in the way. Set those aside. So a boot like this is going to have three components. Basically, it's going to have your outsole. It's a little hard to see on a dirty boot, but it's going to have a midsole, this layer right here, and it's going to have your welt where you see the stitching going through. So on a boot like this, the stitching goes through to the midsole. The outsole is glued on to the midsole. Now, it's a good idea when you do a new sole to replace the midsole as well. I know, that's why I'm saying it right now. Now, some shops may not always replace the midsole, and it may not always be necessary, especially if you're trying to save your customer a little bit of money. But I like to go ahead and just replace that midsole as well. So right now, what we're going to do is we're going to cut the thread as carefully as we can right at that line there, and we'll remove the outsole and the midsole. Now, lots of cobblers have knife preferences for a job like this. I like to use a standard utility knife. You want to make sure you got a nice, fresh, sharp blade in there, and you want to make sure to not cut your fingers. Right, Wilson? Yeah. Here we go. Your hand out of the way. You can lift up on the sole a little bit to make it easier on you. There we go. It's starting to lift out pretty nicely now. Some are easier than others. So this shoe has a foam filler. You can see most of that tore out with the sole. We're going to go ahead and refill that a little bit later. Okay, we're going to do a little light sanding on the welt here. That'll take away some of the remaining surface I wasn't able to cut off and make it a little easier to pick those threads. Okay, so we are going to pick these stitches out here. Always a good idea to remove those stitches before you sew on the curved needle stitcher. Just a much nicer finish. It'll help the needle and new thread find those original holes more easily. I like to use just a simple awl to pick those out. And sometimes this is a real chore, and sometimes with Red Wings it can be really easy to just come right out. So let's do that right now. Just takes a little time. I do think it's going well. I do. How much longer? I don't know, Wilson, I don't know. But what else are we going to do? I mean, this is our job right now, right? It takes however long it takes. Want to be careful to not scratch the upper with your awl. So when you're doing this, you want to kind of draw away from the upper, not into the upper. And that should about do it. I think I'm ready to take a little break and call it a night, Wilson. That sound okay? So Wilson, let's think this through. We got our filler material. We have our midsoles. We have our Vibram 4014 Christie outsole. but this is going to take some time. Bearing in mind the importance of maintaining good turnaround time for your customer. We got a lot of work to do, Wilson. We got a lot of work to do. So, Wilson, what are we going to do next? That's right. We're going to replace the filler in this boot. And why do we do that, Wilson? Right again. If we don't replace this filler in this boot, then this gap will make the boot fit too loosely. And if we overfill it, the boot can fit too tight. So we've got our glue dried up here, our glue dried up on our filler. We're going to go ahead and press these together, and then we'll resurface the midsoles. You know, Wilson, I think this is going to work. I really do. So Wilson, our glue's set up. Let's go ahead and put that filler in. Line it up as best we can. Press that down. We'll do that to the other one, Wilson, and then let's go ahead and resurface the midsole, resurface the outsole, and then we'll get that midsole glued up. All right, Wilson, let's do it. Let's sand off the excess filler, get that nice and flush. We're running a little low on glue, aren't we, Wilson? Wilson, what do you say we let these dry for 20 minutes, come back and put them back together? All right, buddy. So Wilson, by now, you know the importance of having our 20 minutes or so setup time with contact cement. You know that. You know that. So now that these have sat for 20 minutes, we're going to glue them together, hammer them in place, bud. Seal those edges. Looks pretty good, huh, Wilson? Let's hit the 5-in-1 and trim off this excess. All right, Wilson, let's do a rough sanding on these edges here, and then it's going to be time to sew these on to the welt. So, Wilson, I think we're about ready to sew these midsoles on. But that's going to take a lot of thread, which we don't have. Let's get some rest, and I think tomorrow you and me are going to scavenge around this shop and see what we can find.